The boardroom fell silent as Darius Jackson stood tall, holding the airline's termination notice in his hand. "You kicked me out of my first-class seat yesterday because I'm black. Today, I'm canceling our company's $30 million contract with your airline." Their faces paled in recognition. Before we dive into this shocking story of justice served, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you believe in standing up against discrimination. How would you react if you were in Darius's shoes? Let's find out what led to this powerful moment. Darius Jackson wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Growing up in the rough neighborhoods of South Chicago, he learned early that the world wouldn't hand him anything. His mother worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table, and his father had been incarcerated when Darius was just 7 years old, another black man caught in a system designed to fail him. Despite these challenges, Darius excelled academically. He studied under the dim light of a single lamp long after his mother had fallen asleep from exhaustion. His extraordinary aptitude for mathematics and computer science earned him a partial scholarship to MIT, where he worked 2 jobs to cover the remaining costs. After graduation, Darius faced countless rejections from tech companies, watching as less qualified white classmates received offers. Undeterred, he started coding in his tiny apartment, developing what would become the foundation of novice technologies. The early days were brutal: maxed-out credit cards, sleeping on a mattress on the floor, and eating ramen noodles for weeks on end. 12 years later, Novice Technologies had grown into a $2 billion enterprise, revolutionizing supply chain management through artificial intelligence. Darius had built something remarkable, but he never forgot the obstacles he'd overcome or the discrimination he'd faced along the way. On a crisp Monday morning, Darius was preparing for what could be the most important day of his career. Apex Industries, a global tech giant, was interested in a historic merger that would catapult Novice Technologies into the international arena. The meeting in San Francisco could change everything. "Your flight is confirmed for 8 a.m., first class on Legacy Airlines," his personal assistant Jasmine Powell informed him as she handed over his itinerary. "You'll have 3 hours in the air to review the confidential merger documents." Jasmine hesitated before adding, "Just so you know, there have been some recent incidents on Legacy Airlines. Several passengers of color have reported being downgraded or experiencing unusual computer errors with their reservations." Darius waved off her concern. "I appreciate the heads up, but I'm sure it'll be fine. I've flown with them dozens of times, and I'm a platinum member. Besides, I'm the CEO of a billion-dollar company, not some random passenger they can push around." Jasmine nodded, but her expression revealed she wasn't convinced. The next morning, Darius arrived at O'Hare International Airport 2 hours early, dressed in his most impressive custom-tailored navy suit. His premium leather briefcase contained the future of his company, detailed strategies and proprietary information about the potential merger with Apex Industries. As he approached the Legacy Airlines premium check-in counter, he noticed the gate agent, a white man with a name tag reading, Bradley Wilson, glance at him and then exchange a look with a flight attendant nearby. The flight attendant, a blonde woman whose tag identified her as Sarah Thompson, whispered something to Bradley before walking away with a smirk. "Good morning," Darius greeted Bradley with his usual confidence. "Ticket and ID," Bradley responded flatly, without making eye contact. Darius provided his documentation and watched as Bradley scrutinized it far longer than he had for the white businessman ahead of him. "Everything seems to be in order, Mr. Jackson," Bradley finally said, his tone suggesting the opposite. "You may proceed to the premium lounge before boarding." In the lounge, Darius noticed several executives in similar attire, all white, being greeted warmly by the staff who offered them drinks by name. When Darius approached the counter, the attendant asked to see his boarding pass again before reluctantly directing him to the complimentary beverages. Despite these subtle indignities, Darius maintained his composure. Today was too important to let minor irritations distract him. He settled into a comfortable chair in the corner of the lounge, pulled out his laptop, and began reviewing his presentation for Apex Industries. When boarding was announced, Darius gathered his belongings and headed for the gate, unaware that his carefully planned day was about to unravel in the most humiliating way possible. Darius boarded the plane with the first group, settling into seat 2A, a spacious first-class window seat. He stowed his briefcase under the seat in front of him, maintaining access to the critical documents he needed to review during the flight. As other first-class passengers boarded, he noticed Sarah Thompson, the flight attendant from earlier, watching him with poorly disguised suspicion. "Boarding pass, sir?" Sarah asked, approaching Darius. "I already showed it at the gate," Darius replied politely, but reached for his phone to display it again. Sarah scrutinized the digital boarding pass longer than necessary before nodding curtly and moving on. Darius noticed she didn't ask to see the boarding passes of the white passengers seated around him. 10 minutes later, Sarah returned. "Sir, could I see your boarding pass one more time? We're having some seating issues." Darius complied, maintaining his professional demeanor despite the growing irritation. Again, Sarah studied his pass before walking away without explanation. The cabin was nearly full when a commotion at the front caught everyone's attention. A white man in an expensive but rumpled suit had arrived, apparently having just made it before the doors closed. He was speaking loudly into his phone. "I don't care what it takes, just get me on this flight in first class. The Carter deal depends on it," the man barked before hanging up and approaching the flight attendant. Darius recognized him immediately, William Preston, Executive VP at Rival Tech, one of Novus Technologies' main competitors. Preston was known for aggressive tactics and had been trying to sabotage Darius's deals for years. Sarah and Bradley, who had apparently boarded the plane with Preston, huddled together, whispering and repeatedly looking in Darius's direction. After a moment, Bradley approached Darius with a manufactured smile. "Mr. Jackson, I'm afraid there's been a computer error with your seat assignment," Bradley began, his voice loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Darius frowned. "What kind of error? I booked this seat weeks ago. Our system shows you should actually be in economy class," Bradley continued smoothly. "Seat 28E. "That's impossible," Darius said firmly, pulling out his phone. "I have the confirmation right here showing first-class seat 2A, which I paid for myself." Bradley barely glanced at the evidence. "I understand, sir, but our manifest shows differently. We need this seat for another passenger who has the correct booking." As if on cue, William Preston stepped forward with a smug smile. "Is there a problem here? I really need to get to my seat." Darius felt his heart pounding as he realized what was happening. He looked around at the other first-class passengers, all white, who were either staring openly or pretending not to notice the confrontation. A few seemed uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. "This is my seat," Darius stated firmly. "I paid for it, I have confirmation, and I need to review confidential business documents during this flight. I cannot do that in economy class." Sarah stepped in, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Sir, we understand your frustration, but we need to get the flight underway. If you continue to cause a disruption, we'll have to involve airport security." The threat hung in the air. Darius thought quickly about his options. Making a scene could lead to being removed from the flight entirely, which would mean missing his crucial meeting with Apex Industries. The merger negotiations were too important to jeopardize over a seat, even if the principle of the matter made his blood boil. "I'd like the names of everyone involved in this decision and a formal explanation in writing," Darius said, his voice controlled but tight with anger. "Of course, sir," Sarah replied with a patronizing smile that suggested no such documentation would ever materialize. With all eyes on him, Darius gathered his belongings and began the humiliating walk from first class to economy. As he passed through the cabin, he heard murmurs and saw faces looking away when he made eye contact. The message was clear: in their eyes, he didn't belong in first class, regardless of his success or the ticket he had purchased. In economy, Darius was directed to a middle seat in a row near the back. The seats were cramped, with barely enough room for his knees, let alone his briefcase. On his right sat an elderly woman who immediately put on headphones, and on his left was a young white woman who had witnessed his removal from first class. "That was completely messed up," she whispered as he settled in. "I saw the whole thing from the boarding line." "Thank you," Darius replied quietly, appreciating the small gesture of solidarity. "I'm Taylor, by the way," she continued, extending her hand. "And I happen to be a civil rights attorney. I recorded part of what happened on my phone." Darius shook her hand, surprised. "Darius Jackson. And I appreciate that, though I'm not sure what good it will do." "More than you might think," Taylor responded. "This isn't the first time I've seen this airline pull something like this." As the flight took off, Darius found himself unable to concentrate on his merger documents. The tray table was too small, the passenger in front had reclined into his space, and the constant background noise made focus impossible. More importantly, he couldn't shake the humiliation of being singled out and demoted because of his race. Midway through the flight, he got up to use the restroom and overheard Sarah and another flight attendant talking in the galley. "Can you believe that black guy thought he belonged in first class?" Sarah snickered. "Bradley said he was some kind of tech CEO, but I've never heard of his company." "Well, he's back where he belongs now," the other attendant replied. "And Mr. Preston seems much happier with the arrangement." Darius froze, his worst suspicions confirmed. He returned to his seat, seething with anger but determined to maintain his dignity. The merger with Apex Industries was too important to jeopardize with a confrontation at 30,000 feet. But as the plane continued toward San Francisco, he began formulating a different kind of plan, one that would ensure Legacy Airlines would never forget the day they discriminated against Darius Jackson. Darius's flight landed in San Francisco 45 minutes late due to weather delays. Under normal circumstances, this wouldn't have been a problem. His first-class seat would have allowed him to be among the first to deplane, with plenty of time to reach his meeting with Apex Industries. Instead, stuck in row 28, he was forced to wait as passengers slowly filed out ahead of him. By the time he flagged down a taxi, Darius was already 10 minutes late for the most important meeting of his career. He called ahead to apologize, but could hear the disappointment in the receptionist's voice. First impressions mattered in business, and punctuality was the bare minimum expected from a potential partner in a billion-dollar merger. When Darius finally arrived at Apex headquarters, he was escorted to a sleek conference room where 5 executives sat waiting, their expressions a mixture of impatience and curiosity. At the head of the table was Apex CEO Jonathan Morris, a stern man known for his exacting standards. "Mr. Jackson, we were beginning to wonder if you changed your mind about our meeting," Morris said, making no effort to hide his displeasure. "I sincerely apologize for my tardiness," Darius replied, straightening his tie and trying to appear composed despite his lingering anger. "There was an unfortunate incident on my flight that was beyond my control." Morris raised an eyebrow but didn't inquire further. "Well, you're here now. Let's not waste any more time." As Darius launched into his presentation, he struggled to focus. Flashbacks of the humiliation he'd experienced kept intruding, the smug look on Sarah's face, Bradley's false sympathy, William Preston's self-satisfied smirk as he took the seat that rightfully belonged to Darius. These images collided with the important figures and projections he was trying to convey to the Apex team. "Mr. Jackson," Morris interrupted after Darius misstated a key financial projection for the second time, "are you sure you're prepared for this meeting? Your proposal seems less polished than we expected based on your company's reputation." "I apologize," Darius said, wiping sweat from his brow. "As I mentioned, there was an incident on my flight. I was forced out of my first-class seat where I had planned to review these documents one final time." "Forced out?" one of the other executives asked, leaning forward. Darius hesitated. He didn't want to play the race card, especially not in this setting, but the truth was unavoidable. "Yes. Despite having paid for a first-class ticket, I was moved to economy to accommodate another passenger. A white passenger, specifically." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Morris cleared his throat. "That's unfortunate. However, we're here to discuss business, not airline customer service issues. Of course, Darius agreed, though the dismissal stung. The meeting continued, but Darius could feel the energy had shifted. The Apex executives were more reserved, less engaged with his proposals. When his phone vibrated with an incoming text, he normally would have ignored it, but given how the meeting was going, he discreetly checked the screen. It was from Taylor, the attorney he'd sat next to on the flight. "I have clear video of what happened. This is textbook discrimination. Call me if you want to pursue it." Darius slipped the phone back into his pocket, his mind racing between the meeting at hand and the injustice he'd suffered. As he continued his presentation, another text came through. This one made his blood run cold. "FYI, that guy who took your seat. He was on the phone discussing the Carter deal the whole flight. Isn't that the code name for your Apex merger? Thought you should know." Suddenly, the Apex team's reserved attitude made perfect sense. William Preston hadn't just taken Darius's seat, he'd used the 3-hour flight to dig through Darius's confidential merger strategy. The computer error wasn't random, it was industrial espionage facilitated by racial discrimination. "Mr. Jackson," Morris said, interrupting Darius's thoughts, "I think we need to put these discussions on hold. Some concerning information has come to our attention about confidentiality breaches related to this potential merger." "What kind of breaches?" Darius asked, though he already knew the answer. "Details of our negotiations seem to have reached your competitors," Morris replied coldly. "Until we determine the source of this leak, we'll need to pause our talks." Darius wanted to explain, to tell them about William Preston and the airline's role in this sabotage, but he could see from their expressions that their minds were made up. The damage was done. After a terse goodbye, Darius left Apex headquarters, the weight of the collapsed deal heavy on his shoulders. The merger that would have transformed Novice Technologies into a global powerhouse was slipping away because of a blatant act of discrimination. Back in his hotel room, Darius loosened his tie and collapsed onto the bed, emotionally exhausted. His phone buzzed again, another text from Taylor with an attachment. "Here's the video. It's worse than I thought. They clearly targeted you, and I caught the flight attendants making racist comments later." Darius opened the video and watched the incident unfold from an outside perspective. It was even more appalling than he remembered. The systematic way they'd questioned only his right to be in first class, the whispers, the smirks, the threat of security, all captured in high definition. As the video ended, Darius sat in silence, his initial feeling of defeat gradually transforming into something else, determination. This wasn't just about a seat on a plane or even the derailed merger. This was about a lifetime of being told he didn't belong in spaces reserved for white people, despite his achievements. He picked up his phone and dialed Taylor's number. "I want to pursue this," he said when she answered. "But not just with a lawsuit. I have something bigger in mind." "I'm listening," Taylor replied. "First, I need to know everything there is to know about Legacy Airlines, their executives, their corporate structure, their financial vulnerabilities, and most importantly, their business relationships." "What are you planning?" Taylor asked. Darius looked out the hotel window at the San Francisco skyline, his reflection resolute in the glass. "Justice," he answered simply. "But first, I need to make some calls." As he hung up, Darius began composing an email to Jasmine. He needed her to pull every contract, every invoice, every business connection between Novice Technologies and Legacy Airlines. If his suspicions were correct, they were about to discover they discriminated against the wrong person. The morning after the disastrous Apex meeting, Darius woke up with renewed purpose. Rather than flying back to Chicago immediately, he decided to stay in San Francisco to begin his investigation into Legacy Airlines. He called Jasmine and asked her to assemble a team of Novice's best researchers and legal experts for an emergency project. "What exactly are we looking for?" Jasmine asked, already typing notes. "Everything," Darius replied. "I want to know who owns Legacy, who runs it, their history of discrimination complaints, their financial status, their major contracts and partners. I especially want to know how much business we and our subsidiaries do with them annually. I'm on it, Jasmine assured him. The team will be ready for a video conference at noon your time. While waiting, Darius received an email from Taylor with attachments of several discrimination complaints filed against Legacy Airlines over the past 3 years. The pattern was unmistakable: dozens of passengers of color reported being downgraded, subjected to extra security screenings, or removed from flights for minor issues that white passengers got away with regularly. At noon, Darius connected with his team back in Chicago. "What have you found?" he asked without preamble. "It's worse than we thought," Jasmine began. Legacy Airlines has faced 37 formal discrimination complaints in the last 2 years alone, but they've settled each one quietly with non-disclosure agreements. No significant changes to policies or personnel have followed these settlements. "What about our business relationship with them?" Darius pressed. Jordan, Novice's chief financial officer, took over. "We spend approximately $12 million annually on Legacy for corporate travel. But that's just the beginning. Our subsidiaries collectively spend another $8 million. Additionally, we have partnerships with at least 6 companies that each spend over $1.5 million with Legacy. All told, we directly or indirectly influence about $30 million of Legacy's annual revenue." Darius nodded, processing this information. "And their financial position?" "They're vulnerable," Jordan continued. "They've been losing market share to budget airlines and struggling to maintain their premium image. Last quarter's earnings missed projections by 15%, and they're carrying significant debt from a fleet upgrade. Losing $30 million in reliable corporate contracts would hit them hard." "What about the employees involved in my incident?" Darius asked. Lisa from HR shared her screen, showing personnel files that a whistleblower inside Legacy had provided. Bradley Wilson, the gate agent, has had 7 complaints of discriminatory behavior filed against him in the past year alone. Sarah Thompson, the flight attendant, has had 12. Both have been shielded by management. Neither has received any disciplinary action or additional training. "And William Preston?" Darius asked. "That's where it gets interesting," Jasmine interjected. "Preston is executive VP at Rival Tech, as you know. What you might not know is that his brother-in-law, Gregory Palmer, is the CEO of Legacy Airlines. We have evidence of multiple instances where Preston received preferential treatment, including last-minute first-class upgrades when the cabins were allegedly full." Darius leaned back in his chair, the pieces falling into place. "So when Preston showed up late and demanded my seat, it wasn't random?" "Definitely not," Jasmine confirmed. "And we've confirmed that Preston called the Rival Tech team immediately after landing in San Francisco." An hour later, Apex Industries received an anonymous tip about alleged instability in Novice's financial projections for the merger. Darius clenched his fist. "They didn't just discriminate against me. They actively helped my competitor sabotage our biggest deal." "Exactly," Jasmine said. "And we have the evidence to prove it." As the meeting continued, Darius's team outlined more disturbing findings. Legacy Airlines had a corporate culture that not only tolerated discrimination but sometimes encouraged it through coded language about maintaining a certain standard of customer in their premium cabins. Middle management received bonuses for customer satisfaction scores that were primarily collected from white, male business travelers. "One more thing," Lisa added. "We found 4 other black executives who had similar experiences with Legacy in the past year. Each was downgraded or had computer errors with their reservations. None pursued action beyond initial complaints, which were subsequently buried." Darius nodded, feeling a heavy responsibility. How many others had suffered similar treatment but lacked the resources or platform to fight back? What would you do if you were in Darius's position? Would you pursue legal action against the airline? Or would you use your position of power to create change from within the system? Comment number 1: if you believe Darius should publicly expose Legacy Airlines and pursue maximum financial damages. Comment number 2: if you think he should focus on forcing structural changes in the company. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see how this shocking story of discrimination unfolds. As Darius absorbed all this information, he began formulating a plan, one that would address not just his individual case, but the systemic issues at Legacy Airlines. Would he go public with the evidence? Pursue legal action? Use his company's economic leverage? The weight of the decision pressed on him, but he knew one thing for certain: this was about more than a first-class seat or even a derailed merger. Contact the executives who experienced similar discrimination, he instructed his team. See if they're willing to join forces. And schedule a meeting with Legacy Airlines leadership, but don't tell them what it's about. Just say, "I wish to discuss our ongoing business relationship." As the video conference ended, Darius walked to the window of his hotel room, looking out at the city below. People moved through the streets, going about their lives, unaware of the battles others fought daily just to be treated with basic dignity and respect. His phone buzzed with a message from his mother. How did the big meeting go? Darius hadn't told her about the incident yet. Despite his success, she still worried about him constantly, the protective instinct of a mother who had seen too many black men broken by a system designed to exclude them. Meeting postponed, he texted back. "I'll explain later." He set his phone down and returned to the stack of evidence his team had compiled. There was still much work to do before he confronted Legacy Airlines. This time, he would be thoroughly prepared. 3 days after returning to Chicago, Darius called an emergency board meeting at Novus Technologies headquarters. The sleek boardroom on the 40th floor offered panoramic views of the city, but nobody was admiring the scenery today. The atmosphere was tense as Darius explained what had happened on the Legacy Airlines flight and the subsequent derailment of the Apex merger. This wasn't just an inconvenience or poor customer service, Darius concluded, his voice steady despite the anger still simmering beneath the surface. This was deliberate racial discrimination that directly harmed our business prospects. And based on our investigation, it's part of a pattern at Legacy Airlines. He displayed a presentation showing the evidence his team had gathered: discrimination complaints, witness statements, Taylor's video, the connection between William Preston and Gregory Palmer, and the suspicious timing of the information leaked to Apex Industries. The 8 board members sat in stunned silence as the extent of the situation became clear. Finally, Vanessa Wright, one of the senior board members, spoke up. "This is outrageous, Darius. No question about it. But we need to consider the business implications of any response. Legacy Airlines is a major carrier for our executives and team members. Disrupting that relationship could impact our operations." "I understand that concern," Darius replied. "But this isn't just about me. It's about our company values and the precedent we set. If we allow this treatment without consequence, what message does that send to our employees, particularly our black employees?" Robert Kingsley, another board member, cleared his throat. "I agree with Darius. This is unconscionable. But perhaps we should handle it privately. Legal action tends to be messy, public, and unpredictable. I'm not proposing a lawsuit, at least not initially," Darius explained. "I'm proposing we use our economic leverage to force systemic change at Legacy. Remember, we control approximately $30 million of their annual revenue through direct and partner relationships." Jamal Washington, one of the 2 other black members of the board, leaned forward. "I support whatever approach Darius wants to take. Too many companies get away with this behavior because executives of color fear being labeled difficult if they speak up. It's time someone with power took a stand." After 2 hours of discussion, the board voted unanimously to support Darius's plan. They would confront Legacy Airlines leadership directly, demanding accountability and structural changes, with the threat of pulling all business if their demands weren't met. Over the next week, Darius worked tirelessly to prepare for the confrontation. He consulted with civil rights attorneys to understand the legal implications and potential remedies. He reached out to the other executives who had experienced similar discrimination, and 3 agreed to join the effort, providing written statements about their experiences. Darius also contacted several media outlets he trusted, briefing them on the situation but asking them to hold the story until after the confrontation. If Legacy refused to take appropriate action, the story would go public immediately. On the night before the scheduled meeting with Legacy Airlines executives, Darius found himself unable to sleep. He stood at the window of his penthouse apartment, looking out at the Chicago skyline, thinking about his journey. From the struggling South Chicago neighborhood where he grew up to this luxurious apartment with its million-dollar view, he had overcome so much. Yet despite his success, to some people he would always be just a black man who didn't belong in first class. His phone rang, displaying his mother's name. "Hey, Mom," he answered, realizing it was nearly midnight. "I knew you'd be up," she said. "You always had trouble sleeping before a big day, even as a boy." Darius smiled, wondering how mothers always seem to know these things. "Tomorrow is important. I'm confronting the airline that discriminated against me." He explained the situation, and his mother listened quietly until he finished. "Your father would be proud," she finally said. "You remember what he always told you before they took him away? 'Never let them see you bend,'" Darius quoted from memory. "That's right. But he also said something else, 'Make your stand count for more than just yourself. There are people without your resources, your platform, your voice. When you speak, speak for them too.'" Darius felt a lump in his throat. "I will, Mom. I promise." After they hung up, Darius returned to his preparation, reviewing his notes one final time. Tomorrow would not just be about seeking justice for himself. It would be about changing a system that had failed too many for too long. Morning arrived, and with it came a sense of calm determination. Darius dressed with particular care, choosing his most impeccable suit, a subtle armor for the battle ahead. He arrived at Novice headquarters early to meet with his team and the other executives who would join him in the confrontation. "Legacy's representatives will be here at 10, Jasmine informed him. "Gregory Palmer is coming personally, along with their chief legal officer and 3 other executives." "Good," Darius nodded. "And our arrangements?" "All set. The conference room is prepared exactly as you requested. Legal team is standing by, and the evidence is organized and ready for presentation. Taylor will arrive separately, directly from the airport." At precisely 9:55 a.m., Jasmine's phone buzzed. "They're in the lobby." Darius took a deep breath. "Let's go change an airline." The Novice Technologies executive conference room had been meticulously prepared for this confrontation. At one end of the long mahogany table, 5 empty chairs awaited the Legacy Airlines representatives. At the other end, Darius had positioned himself with Jasmine and the company's chief legal counsel, Benjamin Harrington. On the side of the table sat 3 other black executives who had experienced similar discrimination on Legacy flights: Dr. Alicia Foster, CEO of a biotech firm, Terrell Washington, a venture capitalist, and James Baldwin, CFO of a major retail chain. Perhaps most unsettling for the Legacy team would be the camera setup in the corner of the room, with a professional videographer quietly checking equipment. On the wall, a large screen was ready to display the evidence Darius had compiled. At precisely 10 a.m., Jasmine received a call that the Legacy executives had cleared security and were on their way up. Darius straightened his tie and exchanged glances with his allies around the table. This was it. The door opened, and Gregory Palmer led his team into the room. Tall, silver-haired, and impeccably dressed, Palmer exuded the confidence of someone accustomed to controlling every room he entered. Behind him followed Diane Schultz, Legacy's chief legal officer, Michael Bennett, head of customer experience, Thomas Reynolds, chief operations officer, and to Darius's slight surprise, Bradley Wilson, the gate agent from the incident. Palmer faltered momentarily upon seeing the camera and the unexpected additional participants, but quickly recovered, extending his hand to Darius with a practiced smile. "Mr. Jackson, thank you for inviting us. We're always eager to discuss our business relationship with valued corporate clients. Darius shook his hand firmly but didn't return the smile. Please, have a seat. We have much to discuss. As the legacy team settled in, visibly confused by the formal setup and camera, Darius remained standing. Before we begin, I want to be clear about the nature of this meeting, he stated. This is not a routine business discussion. This is about accountability for discrimination that I and others have experienced on your airline, and the systemic issues within your company that allow such discrimination to flourish. Palmer's smile vanished, replaced by a guarded expression. Diane Schultz, the legal officer, immediately opened her notebook and began writing. That's a serious allegation, Mr. Jackson, Palmer replied carefully. If you've had a negative experience, we certainly want to address that, but I think the term discrimination is perhaps premature without. Let me stop you right there, Darius interrupted, picking up a remote. Nothing about this is premature. I have evidence. He clicked the remote, and the screen displayed the video Taylor had recorded on the flight. The room fell silent as they watched Bradley Wilson and Sarah Thompson systematically question Darius's right to be in first class, move him to accommodate William Preston, and later mock him with racist comments. When the video ended, Darius clicked to the next slide, showing William Preston's connection to Gregory Palmer as brothers-in-law, and subsequent slides detailing Preston's call to rival tech and the sabotage of the Apex merger. This wasn't just discrimination, Darius continued into the stunned silence. This was industrial espionage facilitated by racial bias. Your employees removed me from my rightful seat to benefit a family member, who then used the opportunity to sabotage a $1.2 billion merger negotiation. Palmer cleared his throat, clearly rattled but attempting to maintain control. Mr. Jackson, while I apologize for any inconvenience you experienced, this appears to be an isolated incident involving a seating misunderstanding. I assure you Legacy Airlines has strict anti-discrimination policies. Isolated incident? Terrell Washington cut in sharply. That's interesting, because just 3 weeks ago, I was removed from my first-class seat on your airline under remarkably similar circumstances. As was I, 2 months ago, added Dr. Foster. And I've had computer errors with my reservation 4 times in the past year, James Baldwin concluded. Always resulting in downgrades, never upgrades. Always when the first-class cabin still had white passengers being boarded. Darius clicked to a new slide showing the 37 discrimination complaints filed against Legacy Airlines in the past 2 years. This is not isolated. This is systemic, Darius stated firmly. And we haven't even gotten to the most disturbing part yet. He clicked again, revealing internal emails from Legacy management discussing ways to maintain the premium cabin atmosphere by discreetly accommodating our traditional first-class demographic, thinly veiled language for keeping the premium cabins predominantly white. Where did you get these? Diane Schultz demanded, her legal training kicking in. These appear to be confidential internal communications. They were provided by Legacy employees who are disgusted by your company's culture, Darius replied calmly. And there are more. The next slide showed emails specifically discussing Bradley Wilson and Sarah Thompson's complaints history, with management deciding to handle the situation quietly rather than provide training or discipline. Bradley Wilson, who had been silent until now, suddenly stood up. This is outrageous. I've never discriminated against anyone. We had a legitimate computer error with Mr. Jackson's reservation. Sit down, Bradley, Palmer ordered sharply, before turning back to Darius. Mr. Jackson, I think we need to discuss this privately, without cameras. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement that satisfies everyone. You mean a confidential settlement with a non-disclosure agreement, like the 37 others? Darius asked. No, Mr. Palmer. This isn't going away with a check and a silence agreement. Palmer's face hardened. Then what exactly is it you want? Accountability and change, Darius answered simply. Starting with the termination of employees with established patterns of discriminatory behavior. At that moment, the door opened, and Taylor walked in, carrying her own evidence files. She sat down next to Darius's legal counsel. "This is Taylor Rodriguez, the civil rights attorney who witnessed and recorded the incident," Darius explained. "She's documented 12 similar incidents on legacy flights in the past year alone." Palmer leaned over to whisper urgently with his legal counsel. After a moment, he straightened up with a new approach. "Mr. Jackson, clearly there have been some unfortunate misunderstandings. Legacy Airlines values diversity and inclusion, and we take these concerns seriously. I'm prepared to offer you significant compensation for your experience, along with premium status for life and our sincere apologies." "This isn't about me getting special treatment," Darius replied firmly. "This is about changing your company's culture and practices." "We're certainly open to reviewing our policies," Palmer began. "Not good enough," Darius cut him off. "Your company has had years to review policies after dozens of complaints. Nothing has changed." Darius stood up and walked slowly around the table, commanding the room with his presence. "Let me be clear about what's at stake here, Mr. Palmer. Novice Technologies and our subsidiaries currently spend approximately $20 million annually on travel with Legacy Airlines. Our partner companies spend another $10 million. That's $30 million in reliable, high-margin corporate business." He paused to let the numbers sink in. "Additionally, we have the evidence you've seen today, plus considerably more that we haven't shown yet. If we don't reach an agreement on meaningful changes, all of that business disappears tomorrow morning, and this story goes public with the full evidence package shared with major media outlets." The color drained from Palmer's face as he realized the seriousness of the situation. That would be an extreme response to what is essentially a customer service issue. "This was never about customer service," Darius replied coldly. "This was about racism, plain and simple. And your company's financial stability is already precarious. Your last quarter missed earnings projections by 15%. You're carrying significant debt from your recent fleet upgrade. Can you really afford to lose $30 million in reliable annual revenue and weather a major public relations crisis simultaneously?" For the first time, Palmer looked genuinely alarmed. He whispered urgently with his team before addressing Darius again. "What exactly are you demanding?" he asked, his confident demeanor now considerably diminished. Darius returned to his seat and slid a document across the table. "These are our non-negotiable terms for continuing to do business with Legacy Airlines." Palmer picked up the document, and his eyebrows rose as he read through the extensive list of demands. "This is extensive," he said finally. "Yes, it is," Darius agreed. "Because the problem is extensive." As Palmer continued reading, the door opened again, and Sarah Thompson was escorted in by security. She looked confused until she saw Bradley and the rest of the Legacy team, then her expression shifted to alarm. "You requested all involved parties," Jasmine explained to Darius loud enough for everyone to hear. "Ms. Thompson has just arrived." Sarah looked to Palmer for guidance, but the CEO was still absorbed in reading Darius's demands, his face growing grimmer with each page. "What's going on?" Sarah asked nervously. "Please, have a seat, Ms. Thompson," Darius said, gesturing to a chair. "We were just discussing the incident on Flight 372 last week, where you and Mr. Wilson removed me from my first-class seat due to an alleged computer error." Sarah's eyes darted to Bradley, who subtly shook his head in warning. I was just following procedure," she stammered. "Really?" Darius asked, picking up the remote again. "Let's review the procedure in question." He played another clip from Taylor's video, this one capturing Sarah's comments in the galley. "Can you believe that black guy thought he belonged in first class? Bradley said he was some kind of tech CEO, but I've never heard of his company." Sarah's face went pale. "That was taken out of context," she protested weakly. "What possible context would make that appropriate?" Dr. Foster asked sharply. Palmer finally set down the document and looked directly at Darius. Some of these demands are simply unrealistic. Firing employees without due process, appointing a diversity executive with veto power over management decisions, mandatory company-wide training programs. All of which would have prevented what happened to me and these other executives, Darius interrupted. But if you find those terms unreasonable, you're welcome to make a counteroffer. Just keep in mind that our $30 million in business and the public release of our evidence package are both waiting on the outcome of this meeting. Palmer glanced at his legal counsel, who nodded grimly, confirming the seriousness of their position. I'll need to consult with our board, Palmer said finally. Of course, Darius replied. You have until noon tomorrow. After that, we go public and terminate all business relationships with Legacy Airlines. The tension in the room was palpable as Palmer realized the full extent of his predicament. His company was being held accountable in a way that no amount of corporate doublespeak or legal maneuvering could deflect. For perhaps the first time in his career, Gregory Palmer was not in control. Now, Darius continued, would you like to discuss the details of our demands, or do you need time to consider your position? Palmer straightened his tie, a nervous gesture that betrayed his discomfort. I think we should discuss the details. But first, I want to say personally that if discrimination occurred, it is absolutely not in line with our company values. Save the prepared statement, Terrell Washington interrupted. We're not the media. We want action, not words. Palmer nodded stiffly, clearly unaccustomed to being spoken to so directly. Very well. Let's discuss your demands. As they delved into the specifics of Darius's requirements for continued business, the power dynamic in the room had unmistakably shifted. The Legacy Airlines executives, who had arrived expecting a routine corporate discussion, now found themselves fighting for the survival of their company against the very people they had discriminated against. For Darius and the other executives who had experienced similar treatment, it was a moment of reckoning long overdue. The confrontation was far from over, but for the first time, they weren't the ones being forced to justify their presence in spaces where they belonged. The atmosphere in the room grew increasingly tense as Gregory Palmer reviewed each of Darius's demands point by point. The Legacy Airlines executives whispered among themselves, occasionally shaking their heads in disbelief at the scope of changes being required. Let me make sure I understand correctly, Palmer said, tapping the document with his index finger. You want us to immediately terminate Bradley Wilson, Sarah Thompson, and any other employees with verified patterns of discriminatory behavior. That's correct, Darius confirmed without hesitation. Employment termination typically follows a process, Diane Schultz interjected. There are protocols, documentation requirements. The documentation is right in front of you, Darius interrupted, pointing to the screen where Bradley's and Sarah's complaint histories were displayed. 7 documented complaints against Bradley. 12 against Sarah. All buried by management. No disciplinary action taken. No additional training provided. Bradley shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while Sarah stared at the table, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Moving on, Palmer continued, his voice tight. You want us to create a new executive position, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, with direct reporting to the board and veto power over any policy changes that could negatively impact minority customers or employees. Yes, Darius nodded. Selected from a list of qualified candidates that we help assemble, not someone from your existing management team who's been part of the problem. Palmer frowned but continued reading. Mandatory anti-discrimination training for all customer-facing employees, designed and delivered by external experts in racial equity. Non-negotiable, Darius stated. A complete overhaul of your reservation system to eliminate manual overrides that allow gate agents to change seating assignments without documentation and approval. That's right, Darius confirmed. No more computer errors that mysteriously affect only passengers of color. Palmer flipped to the next page. A public apology acknowledging the pattern of discrimination and detailing specific steps being taken to address it. Yes, Darius said. Not a generic statement about recommitting to our values or isolated incidents. A genuine acknowledgement of the problem and concrete actions being taken. Palmer set the document down, visibly struggling to maintain his composure. Mr. Jackson, while I understand your frustration, these demands are extremely far-reaching. They would fundamentally alter our company's operations and management structure. That's precisely the point, Darius replied calmly. Your current operations and management structure have created a culture where discrimination thrives. Fundamental change is exactly what's needed. And if we refuse? Palmer asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Then, as I said earlier, two things happen immediately, Darius explained. First, Novice Technologies and all our subsidiaries terminate all business with Legacy Airlines, effective tomorrow. Our partner companies will follow suit within 30 days. Second, the complete evidence package goes public, the videos, the internal emails, the complaint histories, all of it. Including the connection between you and William Preston, and how that relationship facilitated industrial espionage against my company. Palmer glanced at Diane Schultz, who nodded grimly, confirming the severity of the threat. This is nothing short of corporate blackmail, Palmer protested weakly. No, Mr. Palmer, Darius corrected him. This is accountability. Something your company has skillfully avoided until now. And I should note that we haven't even discussed financial compensation for the damages caused. Damages? Palmer repeated, his voice rising slightly. What damages could possibly justify these demands? Well, for starters, the $1.2 billion merger with Apex Industries that was derailed when your employees helped William Preston access confidential information, Darius replied evenly. But we're willing to set that aside if you meet our other demands. Darius's restraint in not pursuing financial damages seemed to unsettle Palmer more than if he had demanded a massive settlement. This wasn't about money, it was about forcing meaningful change. I need to consult with our board, Palmer said finally. These decisions are beyond my unilateral authority. Of course, Darius nodded. But before you do, I think there's something else you should see. He nodded to Jasmine, who tapped a few keys on her laptop. The screen displayed a compilation of social media posts from Legacy Airlines passengers who had witnessed discrimination incidents, along with interviews of former employees describing the company's toxic culture. This is ready to go live the moment we conclude our meetings without an agreement, Darius explained. Along with the full evidence package being shared with major news outlets, business publications, and aviation industry journalists. By this time tomorrow, Legacy Airlines could be the poster child for corporate racism in America. The color drained from Palmer's face as he watched the compilation. His company's reputation, and by extension, his legacy as CEO, hung in the balance. At that moment, the door opened and a young woman wheeled in a cart with refreshments. The momentary interruption gave Palmer a chance to collect himself, but as he reached for a water bottle, his hand visibly trembled. When the door closed again, Darius leaned forward. Mr. Palmer, I want to be clear about something. This isn't about vengeance or bringing Legacy Airlines down. It's about creating necessary change in an industry where discrimination has been normalized and excused for too long. If you commit to these changes, truly commit, not just pay lip service, we'll continue our business relationship and even help promote the positive steps you're taking. For the first time, Palmer seemed to consider that there might be a way through this crisis that didn't end in disaster for his company. You would publicly support our efforts? If they're genuine, yes, Darius confirmed. This could become a model for how companies address systemic discrimination, not through forced settlements and silence, but through meaningful structural change. Palmer exchanged glances with his team, a silent communication passing between them. Then he turned back to Darius. I'll need to present this to our board immediately. Given the time-sensitive nature of the situation, I'll request an emergency video conference. You can use our facilities, Darius offered. We have a private conference room down the hall equipped for video meetings. Palmer nodded his thanks, though the gesture clearly pained him. As the Legacy team gathered their materials to step out for the board consultation, Bradley Wilson suddenly stood up. "This is ridiculous," he exclaimed, his face flushed with anger. "I've been with Legacy for 15 years. I've never discriminated against anyone. This was a legitimate reservation issue. Mr. Preston is a Platinum Elite member who needed accommodation." "Bradley," Palmer warned, but the gate agent was too far gone. "Do you know how many black passengers I've helped over the years?" Bradley continued, his voice rising. "This is one misunderstanding being blown completely out of proportion." "Is it?" Darius asked calmly, nodding to Jasmine once more. The screen changed to display Bradley's complete complaint history, not just the 7 formal complaints Darius had mentioned earlier, but dozens of informal reports, passenger comments, and internal notes documenting a clear pattern of treating passengers of color differently than white passengers. "This isn't about one incident, Mr. Wilson," Darius explained. "This is about a pattern of behavior so consistent that it cannot possibly be coincidental." Bradley stared at the screen, momentarily speechless as his record was laid bare for everyone to see. Then he turned to Palmer. "You know this is nonsense. Are you really going to let them dictate how we run our airline?" Palmer's expression hardened. "That's enough, Bradley. Go wait in the other room while I consult with the board." "But..." "Now," Palmer ordered firmly. As Bradley reluctantly followed the instruction, Sarah Thompson remained seated, staring at her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Sarah?" Palmer prompted. "You should join the others." She looked up, her eyes wet with unshed tears. "I want to say something first." Palmer hesitated, then nodded. Sarah turned to face Darius directly. I'm sorry. What I said was inexcusable. I've been with Legacy for 12 years, and somewhere along the way, I started absorbing the unspoken attitudes around me. I stopped seeing passengers as people and started seeing them as categories. I'm not asking to keep my job, I know I don't deserve that. But I want you to know that watching these videos, hearing these stories, I'm ashamed of who I've become. The room fell silent, her unexpected apology hanging in the air. Darius studied her face, looking for signs of insincerity but finding none. "Thank you for that, Sarah," he said finally. "A genuine acknowledgement is the first step toward change." She nodded, wiped her eyes, and quietly left the room to join the other Legacy employees. When the door closed behind her, Darius turned back to Palmer. "That's the difference between individual accountability and systemic change. Sarah just took personal responsibility. Now it's time for Legacy Airlines as an institution to do the same." Palmer nodded stiffly and followed his team out, leaving Darius and his allies alone in the conference room. "That was incredibly powerful," Dr. Foster said once they were alone. "Especially the contrast between Bradley's defensiveness and Sarah's apology." "Do you think they'll agree to the terms?" Terrell Washington asked. "They don't have much choice," James Baldwin observed. "The financial hit alone would be devastating, not to mention the PR nightmare." Darius nodded but remained thoughtful. "It's not just about forcing them to capitulate. It's about creating change that outlasts this moment, change that affects how they treat every passenger, not just those with the power to fight back." The group fell silent, contemplating the weight of what they were attempting to accomplish. This wasn't just about righting a wrong done to them personally, it was about addressing a system that had failed countless others who lacked their resources, platform, and influence. After nearly 2 hours, during which Darius and his allies reviewed additional evidence and refined their approach, there was a knock at the door. Jasmine opened it to find Palmer standing there alone, his expression unreadable. "The board has reached a decision," he announced as he re-entered the room. "We're prepared to accept your terms, with 2 minor modifications that I hope you'll find reasonable." Darius raised an eyebrow. "Let's hear them." "First, we request 60 days to implement the reservation system overhaul. It's a complex technical change that simply can't be completed more quickly without risking service disruptions." Darius glanced at his legal counsel, who nodded slightly. "That's acceptable, provided you implement an interim manual review process for any downgrade decisions. Agreed, Palmer said quickly. Second, we request that the public statement be jointly crafted by our communications team and representatives you designate, to ensure it accomplishes your goals while not unnecessarily damaging the company's ability to recover from this. Again, Darius consulted silently with his team before responding. We can work together on the language, but the statement must explicitly acknowledge the pattern of discrimination and detail specific remedial actions. No vague corporate speak or attempts to minimize what happened. Understood, Palmer nodded. With those modifications, we accept all other terms as presented. The tension in the room visibly eased, though Darius maintained his professional demeanor. And the personnel changes? Bradley, Sarah, and the managers who buried the complaints? Palmer's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Effective immediately. The board has authorized termination with cause for all involved parties. Including your brother-in-law's preferential treatment? Darius pressed. Palmer's face flushed slightly, but he held Darius's gaze. William Preston has been permanently removed from our Platinum Elite program and banned from first-class bookings on all legacy flights. His brother-in-law's status will no longer afford him any special consideration. For the first time since the meeting began, Darius allowed himself a small smile. Then it appears we have an agreement, Mr. Palmer. He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Palmer shook it firmly. I'll have our legal team draft the formal agreement immediately, Palmer said. We can sign it before close of business today. Excellent, Darius replied. And I assume the board understands that compliance will be monitored. Any backsliding or attempts to circumvent these changes will result in immediate termination of our business relationship and public release of the evidence. The board understands completely, Palmer assured him, though the words clearly pained him. This isn't a one-time fix. It's a fundamental change in how we operate. As Palmer gathered his materials to leave, he paused at the door. For what it's worth, Mr. Jackson, I am genuinely sorry for what happened to you and these other executives. It reflects a failure of leadership that ultimately stops with me. Darius nodded, accepting the apology without commenting on it. As the door closed behind Palmer, the room erupted in congratulations. They had achieved something remarkable, not just personal vindication, but the potential for systemic change that could benefit countless passengers who would never know the battle that had been fought on their behalf. As Darius accepted the handshakes and backpats from his allies, he couldn't help but think of his father's words, make your stand count for more than just yourself. Today, he had honored that legacy in a way that would create ripples throughout the airline industry and beyond. In the weeks following the confrontation with Legacy Airlines, Darius monitored the implementation of their agreement with careful attention to detail. The airline moved with surprising efficiency, perhaps motivated by the knowledge that any failure to comply would trigger immediate consequences. True to his word, Gregory Palmer personally announced the termination of Bradley Wilson, Sarah Thompson, and 3 management-level employees who had systematically buried discrimination complaints. The airline's public statement, crafted jointly as agreed, acknowledged the pattern of discriminatory treatment and outlined specific steps being taken to address it. Legacy Airlines acknowledges that we have failed to provide equal service and dignity to all our passengers, Palmer stated in a press conference that sent shockwaves through the industry. We are taking immediate and comprehensive action to address the systemic issues that allowed discrimination to occur within our company. The announcement sparked immediate reaction across the airline industry. Competitors rushed to examine their own practices, nervous about similar scrutiny. Aviation news outlets ran special reports on discrimination in air travel, featuring interviews with passengers of color who had experienced similar treatment but lacked the platform to fight back effectively. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Darius received a call from Apex Industries CEO Jonathan Morris. I've been following the Legacy Airlines situation with great interest, Morris said without preamble. It seems the information we received about your company's financial projections was deliberately misleading. Yes, it was, Darius confirmed. Industrial espionage facilitated by racial discrimination, an unusual combination, but effective in derailing our negotiations. Until now, Morris replied. I'd like to reopen our merger discussions, if you're still interested. Your handling of the legacy situation demonstrated the kind of leadership and integrity we value in a partner. Darius smiled to himself. The very incident that had threatened to destroy the merger opportunity had ultimately strengthened it. I'd be happy to resume discussions, Jonathan. My team will set it up. As promised, Legacy Airlines created a new executive position, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, with direct reporting to the board. The selection committee, which included Darius and the other executives who had experienced discrimination, ultimately chose Dr. Maya Collins, a respected expert in organizational culture change who had previously transformed two major corporations facing similar issues. This isn't just about preventing negative incidents, Dr. Collins explained in her first company-wide address. It's about creating a genuinely inclusive culture where every passenger and employee is treated with equal dignity and respect. The mandatory training program rolled out across the company, beginning with senior leadership and working its way through every level of the organization. Initially met with resistance from some employees, the program gradually gained acceptance as people recognized the opportunity to be part of positive change rather than defending a flawed status quo. Perhaps most surprisingly, Darius received an email from Sarah Thompson 1 month after her termination. I wanted to thank you for forcing me to confront the person I had become, she wrote. I'm working with a community organization now, helping to educate people about unconscious bias and the small daily actions that contribute to systemic racism. I'll never be able to undo the hurt I caused, but I'm committed to being part of the solution going forward. Darius shared the email with Taylor, who had become a trusted friend and advisor since the incident. That's unexpected, Taylor commented. Most people just get defensive or disappear. It's encouraging, Darius replied. Systemic change happens one person at a time, alongside the institutional reforms. Meanwhile, the aviation industry as a whole began examining its practices more critically. Several major airlines proactively launched their own reviews, eager to avoid becoming the next legacy. Industry publications ran features on creating more inclusive air travel experiences, and passenger advocacy groups reported increased responsiveness from airlines regarding discrimination complaints. 2 months after the confrontation, Legacy Airlines invited Darius to speak at their leadership conference, an unprecedented move that signaled the seriousness of their commitment to change. Standing before hundreds of Legacy executives and managers, Darius shared his experience without bitterness, focusing instead on the opportunity they now had to lead the industry in creating a more equitable travel experience for all passengers. The true measure of this moment won't be in the policies you implement or the statements you make, he told them. It will be in the experiences of your passengers, especially those who have historically been marginalized or mistreated. It will be in the small daily interactions that either affirm or deny someone's basic human dignity. The response was a standing ovation, not the polite, obligatory kind, but a genuine expression of commitment to the journey ahead. As Darius looked out at the sea of faces, he recognized that while some were undoubtedly there out of corporate obligation, others showed genuine determination to be part of the solution. Back at Novice Technologies, Darius used his experience to examine his own company's practices. Were there ways they too might be perpetuating inequity without realizing it? He initiated a comprehensive review of hiring practices, promotion patterns, and company culture, determined that Novice would lead by example. If we're going to hold other companies accountable, we need to hold ourselves to an even higher standard, he told his executive team. The merger negotiations with Apex Industries progressed rapidly, with both companies eager to finalize the partnership that had been derailed by William Preston's interference. The terms were even more favorable than in the original discussions, with Apex placing increased value on Darius's leadership after witnessing his handling of the Legacy Airlines situation. 3 months after the confrontation, Darius received an unexpected visit from Gregory Palmer himself. The Legacy Airlines CEO had requested a private meeting, arriving without an entourage or PR team. I wanted to thank you personally, Palmer said after they were seated in Darius's office. "Not for letting us off the hook, you certainly didn't do that, but for forcing us to confront issues we had willfully ignored for too long. How is the transformation going from your perspective?" Darius asked. Palmer sighed. "It's challenging, I won't pretend otherwise. Some of our longtime employees are resistant to change. But the younger staff have embraced it wholeheartedly, and customer satisfaction scores among passengers of color have already improved by 23%. And the reservation system overhaul? On schedule, Palmer confirmed. The interim manual review process has already prevented 14 potentially discriminatory seating changes. Each case is being used as a learning opportunity to improve the new system." Darius nodded, impressed despite himself. "I appreciate your candor, Gregory. This could have gone very differently." "Yes, it could have," Palmer agreed solemnly. "You could have taken us down with a very public lawsuit, and frankly, we would have deserved it. Instead, you chose a path that forced us to become better. It's not the approach most would have taken." As Palmer left, Darius reflected on the unexpected outcomes of what had begun as a humiliating experience in first class. The incident had not only transformed Legacy Airlines but had sparked industry-wide examination of discriminatory practices, strengthened the Apex merger opportunity, and even led to personal growth for individuals like Sarah Thompson. The most significant change, however, was perhaps the least visible: the experiences of countless passengers of color who would now be treated with the dignity and respect they had always deserved but too rarely received. For Darius, that was the true measure of success, not the corporate policies or public statements, but the human impact that would ripple outward in ways he might never fully know. 6 months after the confrontation that changed the airline industry, Darius Jackson stood at the podium of the National Business Leadership Conference, looking out at an audience of 2,000 executives from across the country. He had been invited to deliver the keynote address on corporate responsibility and social change, a topic that had taken on new meaning in the wake of the Legacy Airlines transformation. "Real change," Darius began, "rarely comes from comfort. It comes from moments of crisis that force us to confront truths we've been avoiding. 6 months ago, I experienced such a moment when I was removed from a first-class seat because of the color of my skin." The room was silent as Darius recounted the incident, not dwelling on the humiliation but focusing on the systematic response that had created lasting change. "The easy path would have been a lawsuit, a settlement, and a confidential agreement that solved my individual problem while leaving the system intact," he continued. "But that would have betrayed all those who experienced similar discrimination without the resources or platform to fight back." As Darius spoke, he noticed Gregory Palmer sitting in the third row, listening intently. The Legacy Airlines CEO had become an unexpected ally in the fight against corporate discrimination, using his own transformation as a case study in how companies could address systemic bias effectively. "Today, I want to share what we've learned about creating meaningful change, not just cosmetic adjustments that preserve the status quo under a veneer of progress," Darius continued. He outlined the key elements of effective institutional change. Accountability at all levels, structural modifications that prevent discriminatory practices, comprehensive training that addresses both conscious and unconscious bias, and ongoing monitoring to prevent backsliding. But perhaps most importantly, Darius emphasized, is the need for those with power and privilege to truly listen to those who experience discrimination, without defensiveness or denial. Real change begins with acknowledgement. As Darius concluded his speech to thunderous applause, he reflected on the unexpected journey of the past 6 months. The incident that could have been merely a personal humiliation had instead become a catalyst for industry-wide transformation. Following the keynote, Darius participated in a panel discussion with Gregory Palmer and Dr. Maya Collins, Legacy's Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. The three of them shared insights from different perspectives on the airline's ongoing transformation. "Our customer satisfaction scores have increased across all demographic groups," Palmer reported. "It turns out that creating a more respectful, inclusive environment benefits everyone, not just those who previously experienced discrimination." Dr. Collins added, we've implemented structural changes that make discriminatory actions much more difficult to execute and impossible to hide. The reservation system now requires documented justification for any downgrade, with automatic notification to management and the inclusion office. After the conference, Darius returned to Chicago to finalize the merger with Apex Industries. The deal, worth $1.5 billion, $300 million more than the original offer, would create the largest black-owned technology company in American history. The story had captured the business world's imagination, with profiles in major publications highlighting Darius's journey from South Chicago to the pinnacle of corporate success. More meaningful to Darius, however, was the foundation he had established to help victims of discrimination. The Equity Access Fund provided legal resources and advocacy for people experiencing discrimination who lacked the means to fight back effectively. Already, the fund had taken on 23 cases, winning favorable outcomes in 19 of them. On a personal level, Darius had developed unexpected friendships with some of the key players in the Legacy Airlines confrontation. Taylor Rodriguez, the attorney who had recorded the incident, now served on the board of his foundation. Together, they were developing educational resources to help people understand their rights and document discriminatory treatment effectively. Even Sarah Thompson, the flight attendant whose discriminatory actions had contributed to the initial incident, had found a path to redemption. After her heartfelt apology and termination, she had dedicated herself to anti-bias education, speaking candidly about her own journey from unconscious prejudice to awareness. Darius had invited her to speak at a novice technologies training session, where her honest account of how corporate culture had normalized discrimination made a powerful impact on employees. Bradley Wilson, in contrast, had taken a different path. After his termination, he had given interviews to conservative media outlets portraying himself as a victim of reverse discrimination and cancel culture. His attempts to sue Legacy Airlines for wrongful termination had failed when the evidence of his pattern of behavior became public record during discovery. Last Darius had heard, Bradley was working for a smaller regional airline, presumably continuing the same behaviors that had led to his downfall. 6 months after Bradley and Sarah's termination, the industry publication Aviation Weekly conducted a follow-up investigation into Legacy Airlines' transformation. Their report concluded that the changes implemented were substantial and sustained, with measurable improvements in the experiences of passengers of color. The Legacy Airlines case has become a blueprint for how companies can address systemic discrimination effectively, the article stated. By focusing on structural changes rather than symbolic gestures, they have created a model that other companies are now emulating. Indeed, several major corporations had approached Darius for guidance on examining their own practices. Novice Technologies had developed a consulting division specifically focused on helping companies create more equitable environments, not just as a moral imperative but as a business advantage in an increasingly diverse marketplace. The merger with Apex Industries was finalized on a crisp autumn morning, exactly 7 months after the Legacy Airlines incident. As Darius signed the final documents, he couldn't help but reflect on the strange path that had led to this moment. If he hadn't been removed from that first-class seat, if William Preston hadn't been given access to his confidential documents, the merger might have proceeded smoothly but without the increased valuation and respect that had come from Darius's handling of the discrimination crisis. Sometimes our greatest opportunities come disguised as our worst moments, Jonathan Morris observed as they shook hands to seal the deal. True, Darius agreed. But only if we respond to those moments with integrity and purpose. The newly merged company, Novice Apex Global, immediately became a Fortune 500 enterprise with Darius as CEO. One of his first acts in the new position was to establish a mentorship program for young black entrepreneurs, providing guidance, connections, and occasionally seed funding to help them overcome the systemic barriers he had faced in his own journey. 8 months after the incident, Darius found himself booking a flight to a technology conference in Boston. Without thinking about it, he selected Legacy Airlines, a choice that would have been unimaginable before the transformation. As he boarded the plane, he was greeted by a flight attendant who recognized him immediately. "Mr. Jackson, welcome aboard," she said warmly. "We're honored to have you flying with us." Darius smiled and thanked her, proceeding to his first-class seat without incident. As he settled in, he noticed the diverse makeup of both the cabin crew and the first-class cabin itself, a visible sign of the changes that had taken place. The passenger next to him, a young black woman with a laptop open to coding software, glanced over with sudden recognition. "You're Darius Jackson," she said. "Your confrontation with Legacy Airlines inspired me to file a complaint against my former employer for discriminatory promotion practices. They settled, and I used the money to fund my tech startup." "That's wonderful," Darius replied, genuinely moved. "What does your company do?" As she explained her innovative approach to supply chain management, ironically, the very field where Novice had made its mark, Darius realized that this was the true measure of success, not just the changes at one airline or even one industry, but the ripple effects that empowered others to stand up for themselves and pursue their dreams without the artificial barriers of discrimination. When the flight landed in Boston, Darius turned on his phone to find a message from his mother. She had sent a photo of his father, taken during one of their rare prison visits decades ago. Beneath it was a simple message: "He would be so proud of the change you've created." Darius felt his eyes grow misty as he looked at the image. His father had been incarcerated for a non-violent offense that would have likely resulted in probation for a white man. That injustice had shaped Darius's childhood and fueled his determination to succeed against all odds. "Thank you for sharing this with me," he texted back to his mother. "Everything I do honors his legacy." 10 months after the Legacy Airlines incident, Darius was invited to return to their corporate headquarters, this time not for a confrontation but to witness the graduation of the first class of employees who had completed the comprehensive anti-discrimination training program. As he walked through the building, he noticed visible changes, not just the diverse faces in leadership positions displayed on the wall of executives, but subtle shifts in how people interacted with each other and with him. Gregory Palmer met him in the lobby, looking both older and somehow more at peace than during their confrontation. "Our customer satisfaction ratings are at an all-time high," Palmer shared as they walked toward the auditorium. "Not just among passengers of color, but across the board. It turns out that creating a culture of respect benefits everyone." "That's often the case," Darius nodded. "Eliminating discrimination isn't just morally right, it's good business." The training graduation was a surprisingly emotional event, with employees sharing personal revelations about biases they hadn't previously recognized and commitments to creating a more inclusive environment. Dr. Maya Collins, now firmly established in her role as Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, presented data showing measurable improvements in passenger experiences and employee satisfaction. "The transformation isn't complete," she acknowledged candidly. "Cultural change is a journey, not a destination. But we've laid a foundation that will support ongoing progress." As Darius prepared to leave, he was approached by a flight attendant he didn't recognize. "Mr. Jackson, I just wanted to thank you," she said earnestly. "I've been with Legacy for 20 years, and for most of that time, I knew things weren't right but didn't feel empowered to speak up. What you did created space for people like me to be part of the solution instead of silent bystanders." Her words stayed with Darius long after he left the building. The most profound changes weren't always visible in policies or statistics, but in the individual human beings who found their voices and their courage. 1 year after being removed from his first-class seat, Darius Jackson stood at the window of his office at Novice Apex Global Headquarters, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The company was thriving, with the merged operations exceeding financial projections and creating hundreds of new jobs. The Equity Access Fund had expanded to provide resources nationwide, helping dozens of discrimination victims find justice. Legacy Airlines had become a case study in corporate transformation, with their practices now considered industry-leading in equity and inclusion. Other airlines had followed suit, implementing similar changes to avoid becoming the next cautionary tale. The ripple effects had extended beyond aviation into hospitality, retail, and other customer service industries. Taylor Rodriguez had become a nationally recognized civil rights attorney, using her experience with the Legacy case to help other victims of discrimination. She and Darius remained close friends and allies in the ongoing work of creating more equitable systems. Sarah Thompson had found her calling as an anti-bias educator, speaking candidly about her own journey from being part of the problem to being part of the solution. Her willingness to own her mistakes and work toward redemption offered a powerful example of how individuals could change alongside institutions. As for William Preston, his attempt to sabotage the Novus Apex merger had ultimately backfired spectacularly. Rival Tech had lost market share to the newly merged company, and Preston himself had been quietly let go after his connection to the Legacy Airlines incident became widely known in industry circles. Darius's phone rang, interrupting his reflections. It was Jonathan Morris, now his co-chair at Novus Apex Global. "The mentorship program candidates are here," Morris informed him. 20 young entrepreneurs ready to change the world. "I'll be right down," Darius replied. As he rode the elevator to the conference room where the ments were waiting, Darius reflected on how a single incident of discrimination, painful as it was, had catalyzed changes far beyond what he could have imagined. From personal humiliation had come professional triumph, industry transformation, and opportunities for countless others. The elevator doors opened, and Darius stepped out to meet the next generation of leaders, young men and women from diverse backgrounds who would shape the future of business and society. Their faces lit up as he entered the room, eager to learn from someone who had not only achieved extraordinary success but had used his position to create meaningful change. "Welcome to Novus Apex Global," Darius greeted them warmly. "I'm looking forward to hearing your ideas and helping you overcome whatever obstacles stand in your way." As he looked at their hopeful faces, Darius thought about his father's words. "Make your stand count for more than just yourself." In standing up against discrimination at Legacy Airlines, he had created ripples that would continue long after the original incident was forgotten, ripples that would help these young entrepreneurs and countless others claim their rightful places in rooms where decisions were made. That, Darius reflected, was the true measure of transformation, not just changing policies or practices, but creating a world where the next generation would face fewer barriers and find more allies in their journey toward justice and opportunity. What would you do if you faced discrimination like Darius did? Would you use your position and resources to create systemic change? Leave a comment below sharing how this story resonated with you. If you found this story inspiring, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, sometimes our most painful moments can become catalysts for the most meaningful change. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you in the next powerful true story. Darius Jackson's story teaches us that true power lies not in seeking personal revenge, but in creating systemic change that benefits everyone. When faced with discrimination, he could have chosen the easy path of a private settlement that would have solved his individual problem while leaving the broken system intact. Instead, he leveraged his position and resources to transform an entire industry. The lesson is clear: individual acts of courage can create ripple effects far beyond what we imagine. By refusing to accept discrimination as just the way things are, Darius forced accountability at every level, from flight attendants to the CEO. His strategic approach combined economic leverage, evidence, and a clear vision for meaningful change rather than symbolic gestures. This story also reveals how discrimination often hides behind computer errors and company policies that seem neutral but are applied unequally. By exposing these mechanisms, Darius made them impossible to deny or defend. Perhaps most importantly, this narrative shows that addressing discrimination isn't just morally right, it's good business. Legacy Airlines discovered that creating a culture of respect improved experiences for all passengers and employees, not just those who had previously been marginalized. The greatest power we have is not in seeking punishment for wrongs done to us, but in transforming systems to prevent those wrongs from happening to others.